And
There we
with
go.
me,
Hello.
with me is the lovely Julia Chayko, who we had a little tiny bit of technical issues, but we figured it out now. So we are both here. Welcome, and thank you for
Thank you.
being my first guest. So
No, thank you for having me.
chronic journeys is basically my idea is that I'm going to talk to people who I like and admire their work and who do good things and basically shine a light on a whole whack of people. And the goal is to do this once a week. Day depends a little on things like holiday Mondays and the guests' availability, but we're starting off with Monday at 2. Why not? And Julie and I had actually met for the first time 5 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, we went to a conference hosted in Toronto with RA advocates, and we met and hit it off right away. So before we get started, I just want to say if anybody's out there watching, if you're patient enough to come back, or if you're watching this afterwards, say hi in the comments. And if you have any questions for Julia, by all means, leave them in the comments, and we'll keep talking even after we go off of this. So again, welcome. Tell us a bit about yourself
Okay.
and who.
Um, So my name is Julia, obviously. I live in Vancouver, British Columbia. So it's afternoon over there for you. It's morning still here for me. And it's a beautiful spring day here in BC. We've been very lucky
Mm,
with the weather.
mm,
So I'm a writer, actress, dancer, and arthritis advocate in Vancouver. And you can sort of find you can find a little bit about my story of living with rheumatoid arthritis on my blog called "The Old Lady in My Bones."
and I will be
So
putting links to Julia's blog on in the comments after we're done chatting. Um, Great, thank you so much. So you have obviously. Okay, so this is the classic. Whenever I go live, we have a bit of a drinking game. Um, and three things happen. Usually it's right after lunch. So because of biologics, I have a lot of gas, so I'll burp. The phone will ring, or Lucy will insist on my cat will insist on being part of it. So there's
of
number
course.
one. So if you're out there, take a shot. Um,
Now I'm just waiting for Lucy to show up. Yeah.
yeah, well, she's sleeping right now. If you can see,
Okay.
kind of, well, you can't right now because of the two shot here, but she's sleeping. She's tucked herself into the bed. So you have rheumatoid arthritis. When did this happen,
Yes.
and what were the first symptoms?
Well, this was probably about 10 years ago. I was diagnosed in my 30s.
Mhm.
And I woke up one morning in the fall. It was a very cold fall day. It was November, and I just woke up one morning feeling like I was coming down with something, almost like I had the flu, like flu-like
Mhm.
symptoms. I was a little bit feverish. My joints were swollen and sore, and I was just feeling really just kind of under the weather, a little bit like a truck had run me over. And I didn't think anything of it, to be honest. I actually just thought, oh, it's a seasonal flu, and or one of two things. It was either the seasonal flu or the night before, because at the
Mhm.
time that I was diagnosed, I think I was rehearsing for a theater show and doing about 3 classes a week of dance.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I was really go go go, and so I thought, well, maybe I just pushed it a little too hard. And
Mhm.
coming into contact with all the people that I come into contact with, I just thought, yeah, I've caught something. So that's how it started. And it started out in the morning where I was feeling really awful. And then throughout the day, I started to feel a little bit better. And
Mhm.
so by the time I went to bed that night, I was like, okay, I guess this is going to blow over. And the
Mhm.
next morning, started all over again. So that went on for about, I'd say, 5 to 6 weeks before I thought, this is strange. I should go see someone about this. This is not this is not going away. So let's go find out what it is. And it turned out it was early rheumatoid arthritis.
Oh, so you got a diagnosis pretty quickly.
I was lucky because I did work in the industry. I worked as a medical office
Um,
assistant. So I had a little bit of a connection. And first of all, my GP was amazing. And that's the first thing, is you have to have the
mm,
amazing GP. And I had an
mm,
amazing GP at the time who took the time to actually look at my hands and
mm,
test my joints and go, I think we'll send you to a rheumatologist. So he right off the bat said that.
mm,
Yeah.
mm. Yeah, well,
Hmm.
and I think you just hit the nail on the head. Like a lot of times when I talk to people who have had a delayed diagnosis, it's often because their family doctor isn't aware of all the intricacy, which I guess to a point that's not their job,
Hmm.
but yeah, that's often where the holdup is. And then of course access, the wait time to go see a rheumatologist as
Yeah.
well. Okay, so how did it affect your life, like once you got it identified, what was happening?
Yeah, so there was a lot of life changes for me as I was sort of struggling through dealing with this, new pain in my life, and the fatigue particularly hit me really hard, and so it affected me in many ways. I had to take a break from doing theater for a while
Mm,
because theater takes a lot of energy and a lot of time, and I
mhm,
just didn't have the energy. I was just feeling awful, and I was tired, and it's 3 months of rehearsal and then 4 weeks of performance. It's very high energy. I had to stop dancing for a while,
mhm,
and I've never actually returned to dance full on the way I had back then.
mhm,
I was doing salsa dancing at the time, and partners who don't know you, or partners who are learning, don't understand that your joints are sore, so they can be a little rough when they're, take you by the elbow, take you by the hand.
mhm,
So I had to stop doing that for a while.
mhm,
And full-time work, I got really tired working full-time. So I was
mhm,
working full-time, doing
mhm,
theater, doing dance, and I was just like, wow, everything just sort of came to a screeching halt. So stopped
mhm,
theater for a while, stopped dance, and I actually switched from full-time to part-time work so
mhm,
that I could find a way to sort of manage and adapt to my
mhm,
life. And I was lucky to be able to do that because I had the
mhm.
support to be able to do that. So
I think when we
yeah.
first met, that was when you were still on a break as an actress, and I
Yeah.
think I remember when you went back and just what a victory that was for you.
Yes,
It
yeah.
just
It was amazing. It was amazing to get back on stage. I got back on stage probably about 4 years after.
mhm,
And I did not come back quietly. I came back in a lead in a very physical comedy.
yeah.
and and I did it, and that was my victories. I got through the performance
Yeah.
and I did it.
Was
So
that the lifeboat thing? Or was that
no, actually,
no,
it
that
was
was
it was
earlier
it
one.
was a few years before the lifeboat. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was in a show called Let's Murder Marcia. And yeah, it was an all out screaming Carol Burnett like comedy where my
Wonderful.
character Marcia, thought her husband was out to kill her when he was really just trying to plan a surprise party for her birthday. It was a riot.
That
Yeah.
sounds awesome. Sounds
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
So I just want to say hi to a couple of people in the comments. Lynn is here, as well as Sally, Robin, and Kathy. Hello, everyone. Glad to see you out
Hello,
there.
everyone. Hi, everyone.
If you're watching and haven't said hi, please feel free to say hello in the comments. It's always great to see who's out there. And if you have any questions or comments for Julia, we'll be popping in and out of questions, as well as do some at the end. Um,
Yeah.
and Kathy says here that "Let's Murder Marcia" sounds hilarious.
Oh
It
yeah, it
actually
was it was a riot.
it sounds like it
Yeah, it
was
was
both.
probably one of my favorite roles.
Yeah, so it was fun both to watch and to be in.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everybody likes a comedy, right?
Mhm.
Comedies are always a hit at the theater.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
imagine. So, how do you advocate for RA?
So a couple years after my diagnosis, so another aspect of my creative life is I'm a writer,
Mhm,
and I have always written. I wrote when I was a kid. I wrote when I was a teenager, and and then I got very heavily into theater. So my plan was is I always wanted to write, and I always knew I would write.
mhm,
But I thought I'm going to write after I do all of this theater and dance stuff because I can do all this while I'm young, and then later on in what I would call the winter of my life, I would write.
yeah.
So what RA actually did for me was when I realized when I couldn't do theater and I couldn't do the dance, that was sort of the sustenance of my life. I
Mhm,
went back to writing. And I started writing about, I created a blog called The Old Lady in My Bones. And I
mhm,
started writing about living with RA. But
mhm,
I wanted it to be a little bit of a different story. I wanted to actually write more about how my life, how I changed my life to
mhm,
live with RA and still included all the things that I love to do in it.
mhm,
So it was about how you adapt and how you find your way down a different path
mhm,
to a bit of it's a bit of a different life. That's definite. It is a different life. You won't always go back to what you had before, but that doesn't mean there's something you can't go to. So I want to encourage people to explore that in themselves and find a way to still find the things to love to do and maybe try things you never thought to try before,
mhm,
because now maybe it's something that you would enjoy doing and you excel at. So
yeah,
just sort of finding a different way to live with
yeah,
the disease.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I think that that's where you and I connect a lot. It's that whole, yes, there are a lot of things that have closed off, but it doesn't mean like there's all these other whoops. There's all these other aspects and of
Yes,
life and things that you can just dive into, and doesn't mean your life is over. It just means you have to kind of pivot to something else.
exactly. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm. Um, so you're which brings me to my next question, which is exactly about writing. You are at the moment also working on another endeavor. So spill the beans, please.
So last year, I had the incredible privilege of being accepted to a limited program called the Writers Studio over here in Vancouver at Simon Fraser University. And it was a 1 year intensive writing study where you're paired with a mentor and you do workshops with your people. And you basically start on a project that you always wanted to try to write. And
Mhm,
I had an idea for a novel a couple years ago, and I actually started to write a bit of a novel. So this program helped me bring that to life, and I'm in the midst of trying to put it all together right now. I don't want to give the farm away too much, but it is a psychological thriller about a small town who has certain secrets that are going to be exposed, and what will happen to this town once those secrets are exposed.
Small town secrets is always makes for good stories, right?
Yes.
Um, and let's see. So another place we intersect is that you're also a member of my private Facebook group called Lena's
Yeah.
Couch, and which is a great place. I will drop the link in the comments. If you're not a member, then please join us. It's basically a virtual couch where we'll all hang out and chat. So one of the things that we talked about last week was paranormal experiences.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you mentioned that every theater out there is haunted, and you may have had an experience or two. Do tell.
Yes, yes. So theaters, because most theater buildings have been around for a very long time, they have a massive amount of history behind them. So one of the theaters that I perform in has been around since like the 1920s, maybe a little bit earlier. It's a very old building. It's had a lot of people pass through it. It's had a lot
Mhm.
of, actors trot on the boards. And this particular building has actually been investigated by a local ghost hunting group. And
Oh.
there have been experiences that we as the actors have felt on the stage. So I think one of the biggest memories I have is being on stage, and I'm standing beside a window, and there's a curtain that's just down drawn over the window, and I'm
Mhm.
talking to my co-star, and he's standing there looking at me, and all of a sudden we both felt this breeze, and it was a very cold breeze, and it was very specific. It kind of blew up one
Mhm.
side of us, flipped the curtain up, and dropped it down, and it was completely still.
Oh.
And there was that moment of, we both looked at each other like, what was that? And the audience, the audience gasped. Like, there were some people in the audience who gasped when they
Wow.
when they saw that. So it was very interesting, because it was like, okay, so it's not just us. Other people saw this too.
Mhm.
So that was probably the biggest thing that I ever encountered.
Mhm.
Other stories with this particular theater have said there's a woman in white who sits in a certain seat at the back,
Mm.
and has been spotted there occasionally. um, People who have had to stay late at the theater, like techs doing lights and sound. Sometimes there's a point in the evening, and sometimes they're there until 11 o'clock midnight to try to get everything done for a show the
Mhm.
next day. And there's always a point that they always say, there's a point where they go, it's time to go. And they just have
Oh.
this feeling they have to go, and they
Oh,
leave.
wow.
They
I
completely respect it. They respect the
Yeah,
feeling, and they leave. Yeah.
that's pretty
It's
smart.
it's very, yeah, so lots of things in the theaters. Like, there's just and I'm sure actors have lots of stories about the ghosts in the
Yeah.
theaters, and
So how do you
yeah.
keep going when you kind of like that incident with the curtain, when you've been kind of pulled out of the play and the audience are going, "Oh my God," how do you keep going after that?
You do, you just do. Yeah,
Yeah.
you just remember where
I
you are, and like, the show must go on, right, at all
Yeah, yeah,
times.
yeah.
So there's lots of things that happen in live theater, like props catching on fire, like
Oh,
audience's phones going off.
yeah.
Yeah, I did a show where a prop caught on fire, and the actor put it out on stage and made it part of the scene. And
Oh,
he
wow.
was brilliant. It looked like it
Yeah,
was part of the scene. But we're all like, "Oh my God, that's not supposed to be happening." But you have to
yeah,
keep your character face, and
yeah,
you
yeah.
have to try not to let on that this wasn't supposed to happen, right? But yeah, there's lots of distractions in live theater.
Mhm.
Anywhere from, the some of the older patrons are very funny when they're watching certain shows, because they like to narrate as they
Oh,
watch.
okay. Uh-huh.
And we can hear them,
Yeah.
saying things like, "Oh, look, he's creeping up behind her. Oh, look," and we're like, everybody can see it. But they do that,
Wow.
and I don't think they think about it, because it's, yeah. So
Yeah,
lots of
that
stuff like that happens in live theater, which makes it very exciting.
I
Yeah.
bet, I bet. So Kathy actually has a question. She says, "Is it
Sure.
true that you're never supposed to mention that Scottish play in theater?"
It is absolutely true.
Is it really?
It is a big it is a big superstition. Yeah. You
Mhm.
you never mention the Scottish play during a show, in the green room, backstage. Another popular superstition is, you do not whistle
Yeah,
backstage.
I heard that. I
Yeah.
heard that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's
Do
there's
do you
lots of
know?
lots of crazy superstitions that actors have that you just do not do. Yeah.
So I think I read something about, for those of you who don't know the Scottish play, and given that this is not theater, can we mention the name, do you
You can
think?
mention it. Yes, this is not a theater. But
Uh,
don't be surprised if something happens. I'm just kidding.
okay, it's a Shakespeare play.
Yes.
Yes, it's Macbeth. You're not supposed to mention it.
Yes.
And I think I've read something about like this long tradition of bad things happening if you mention the name. But do you know
Yes.
where the whistling thing happened? Like it comes from? Is have you ever looked into
It
it?
I've never actually looked into it. It goes from way back, and it just
Mm,
seems like from the moment that I ever started doing theater, and I was 12 the first time I did my first show and stepped onto stage and fell in absolute love. And even from that time, I think one of the older actors took me aside and just said, "You never whistle back here." And just like, and I don't think he thought that I knew about Macbeth when I was that age.
yeah.
But I actually did. I read a couple of Shakespeare plays when I was very young.
Mhm.
um, yeah, so it wasn't until a couple shows later, when I was more of a teenager, where
Mhm.
I may have mentioned something and somebody says to me, "You don't ever mention that stage back. You don't ever mention that play backstage." And I'm like, "Okay, we will do. We'll do that." Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. Oh, and I think we have one of your fans out here. Says love watching you. So I guess he's
Uh,
Jan has seen you. So that's great. Now, so talk to me about being an actress with RA. Aside from the energy aspect, how does your joints respond to that kind of schedule?
yeah. So I do obviously get more flares during a
Mhm,
show,
mhm,
because I get less rest.
mhm,
So it's very busy. It's like I said, it's 3 to 4 months of rehearsal and then 4 weeks of
mhm,
shows, and you're doing 4 to 5 shows a week.
mhm,
So not a lot of, and you'll get to the theater at 6 and you'll leave it at midnight. So you're not getting a lot of sleep if you have to get up and go to work the next day,
yeah.
and it's go go go. So for me, I just try to take some extra care before the show. If I have to take, a painkiller to get through, I will do that. Um, Sometimes I just sit and just breathe.
Mhm,
Most of the time, when I'm on the stage, the adrenaline takes over.
mm.
So the adrenaline will actually mask all the arthritic pain.
Oh
So
yeah.
while I may be hurting before I go on, the moment I get on and get into character and the lights come on and the audience is there, it's almost like I can transcend the RA for 2 hours.
Mhm.
And then I'll definitely pay for it after the show if it's a bad night. And
Yeah.
if we've had accidents where you fall on stage, or you're doing a pratfall and you fall the wrong
Yeah.
way, and so
Mhm,
it is, and so because of that, I don't do shows as often as I used to. So
mhm,
whereas I used to do 4 to 5 shows a year, I
mhm.
now do 1 or 2.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've cut down on the number of shows.
Mhm. So, so question, because this is one of those fascinating things that we never really talk to people who do this kind of work with RA. One of the things I've read about in the past, and Kathy just talks about other actors who has lived with this disease.
Mhm.
Has there been an impact on your career once you sort of quote unquote came out as having a chronic illness? Is that a
Um,
concern?
I don't know. It never was for me. It
Mhm,
never has been for me. And I mean, it's not something, the people that I work with on the stage, they know me quite well. So it's easy for
mhm.
me to talk about it with them. And,
Right.
they don't really have any judgment on it. A lot of the directors that I work with, again, I worked with on several occasions, and I worked with
Mhm,
even before I was diagnosed.
mhm,
So for me, I'm just lucky because they know what I'm capable of once I
mhm,
get up on the stage. And so I don't have any concerns about that.
mhm.
Yeah.
Well, and it's sort of interesting because several years ago, I was doing a lot of talking to some people who were in the business who said, yeah, there's some really well known people who have RA
Hmm.
and who have come really close to coming out, like, the big A-list stars,
Yes.
come really close to coming out and being vocal about it, being a spokesperson, and then at the last minute been dissuaded by the publicist and basically said that was going to kill your career. And it's sort of a feedback loop. Is the less people talk about things like that, the more
Mm.
there's this perception that it'll
Mm.
destroy your career. And I guess to your point, it's like, well, once you guide yourself, and if you say yes, I'm willing to do this role, that means that you're capable of it. So it's nice to hear that in Canadian theater, at least, there seems to be more of an understanding of like, yeah, well, if you say you can do it, you can do it, and we'll go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And and the thing with that is it doesn't matter, it's any circumstance really. If you say you can do a role, then you
mhm,
need to do it and you need to bring everything you have to it, because
right,
if you don't, it's going to be remembered, and
yeah,
then you're not going to get brought back for other roles,
yeah,
right? So,
which means that you're only going to say I can do it if you're in a position to do so.
yeah,
Which I
exactly. So
say,
yeah. So
mhm,
be sure that you can do it,
yeah,
and prepare yourself to do it, and know it's going to be a rough ride, but it's
mm,
also going to be a wonderful ride at the same time.
mm.
Right.
Well, and I think that goes for an awful lot. Other jobs, other things in life, is that there are times when whatever the fallout is physically is worth it
Yeah.
because of the ride aspect, right? Have you ever needed any sort of accommodation for your condition, like maybe less pratfalls or changing aspects of a performance so you could do
Uh,
it?
Yes, yes, I have, when, the directors are very easy to work with. They're very open to what the actors are comfortable with most of the time.
Hmm.
So it's a discussion really before it goes into practice. So the director will suggest, well, maybe you try this. And if it's something that's kind of beyond my, ability, or if I know it's going to hurt me,
Hmm.
I will suggest, well, maybe not to this extent. Why don't we try it this way? And we still
Right.
get the same reaction. So they're very good about making the adjustments.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's kind of that can be kind of inspiring for those of us who might be feeling very cautious about being open with our employees or families or whatever about our limitations out of a fear of what it's going to
Mhm.
do. I'm just going to remind everyone that whether you live in the US or Canada, which is most of the people out there, you are entitled to accommodation in your job. And as long as you can do the actual job, it's more about how you do it. And you just illustrated that sometimes having that open conversation where both parties are bringing a flexibility to the conversation is really important.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So if anybody has questions out there, there's a bunch of comments who really out there about people really loving like your perspective, for instance, is how we keep doing the things we love and doing that pivot to um, to finding other things
Mm.
or other ways of doing things. Sally wants to know where you can follow you, and that is the old lady in my bones is
Yeah.
theoldladyinmybones.com, and I will drop that link in the comments. Is there links on your blog to your social media accounts?
Yeah, there should be a Twitter account on there.
I'm sure there's.
Yeah. Yeah.
If not, it is. Let me put that on screen. It is at JG Chayko. You can follow Julia um,
Twitter.
on Twitter.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's Monday and I didn't have a lot of sleep. Um, and let's see what other questions we have. Um, and there's some comments saying thank you for watching. This interesting perspective, and I do think it's really cool. It's one of the reasons I approach you first is because you have a you have a profession that's quite different from most people.
Mm.
And just
Yeah.
hearing how you negotiate that with RA is really valuable. So what's up next for you?
No, right now I'm working on the book, and
Mhm,
I'm hoping to get a first draft done this year.
mhm,
Um, there was the possibility of maybe doing another show, but then of course COVID-19 came along and
mhm.
kiboshed all that. So
Yeah.
most of the theaters will not be having any shows this year, not for
Mhm,
2020 at the moment. So we'll see what happens for 2021.
mhm,
I may be ready
mhm.
to walk the boards again at some
Mhm.
point. So
Mm.
for now it's all about the book, and let's get the book done and see
Yeah.
where it can go.
So how is the,
Yeah.
like, let's mention the elephant in the room. How is COVID and lockdown treating you?
We're really lucky. We're not so much in a lockdown mode over here in British Columbia. We're in a state of emergency, and most businesses are closed, and we're asked not to gather in. Right now, I think it's a group of under 50, but I
Mm,
think what they're actually saying is don't gather outside of your household.
mm,
So we're having some restrictions that are being loosened up today, not today, after the long weekend in May.
right.
They're
Mhm,
going to try to do a soft opening of some businesses.
mhm,
So we'll see how that goes.
mhm,
This past weekend was an incredibly beautiful weekend,
mhm.
and so many people just flocked to the beaches. So I don't know how much social distancing was going on there, but I guess we'll find out in 2 weeks if they've ruined it for everyone.
Yeah, there's that, right? Yeah,
So
and for the Americans or non-Canadians rather watching out there, this coming weekend is our first long weekend of the summer, which I hope is going to be better than it is today. We have a frost warning in Toronto, so yay. So at least we haven't had that full-on gorgeous weather, which means more people are staying inside. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Like everybody in the last week seemed to have just gone woof, right? So it's
yeah,
interesting. It's going to be interesting to see if we have a lot of cases in 2 weeks and are told to go back inside. So we'll see.
it's a real challenge. It's a real challenge for BC, particularly. It's such an outdoor province.
Yeah,
We've got mountain trails and we have beaches and very mild weather most of the time.
yeah,
So a lot of people are out walking, biking, hiking, all of
yeah,
those things. And I think, after so many weeks of, being isolated, people are getting
mhm.
restless and they're getting antsy and they want to go out. Right.
Oh yeah,
So you will see. We'll
yeah.
see what happens.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. It was lovely having you, and thank you everybody who left comments and who watched. And just a reminder, keep leaving the comments. I'll be checking in over the next few days in the comment section, keeping the conversation going. And so, thanks for helping me launch this thing.
No, thank
It was
you. It
awesome.
was it was a ton of fun. It's always fun to talk about the things I love to do and to chat with everyone. And so nice to see everybody's comments off on the side here. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
All right, and just one last thing. You can find Julia at the Old Lady in My Bones, where she writes wonderful posts about that whole shifting your perspective to and living a good life. So thank you again, and
All
I
right.
will see you. I'll see you soon.
You
Okay.
bet. Okay.
Bye. Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye.